All right, so with your snowman, you're going to be adding a torus shape or something else to turn it into an ornament. Um, we're going to be 3D printing either your snowman or your snowflake. It's going to be one color. Our 3D printers can just do one color. Some 3D printers can do two colors, and they're even coming out with some that can do more than that now. So if you want to kind of see what it's going to look like in different colors, you can change it to see. Let me show you, what I want to show you today is kind of what happens, what I'm doing to your file after you submit it. Okay, so after you save it as a STL and turn it in, here is what I'm doing with it. It needs a little bit more to be done with it afterwards. It has to be put through a program called a slicer program. That's a program that's either made by the 3D printer itself or one that works with it. Cura is a popular one. It's made by Ultimaker, which is one of our white expensive 3D printer, but it also works with a bunch of other ones, including our smaller ones, the Ender 3s. And so I take the file, and I drop it into this program, and there's just a few things I can do with it here. The main things I'm looking at is over here. First thing I do is I set which 3D printer is going to be printing on it. So if we're going to be printing this on one of the small black ones, I select Ender 3. If I'm going to be doing the white one, I just select Ultimaker. And that just sets all the settings in the printer itself. I really don't have to do anything besides select that. What I do have options with, I'm going to do Ender 3 because that's one we use most often. You'll see these options kind of change over here. This right here is how detailed it is. So this is how much space is in between each layer. So when a 3D printer prints, it prints the bottom layer and then moves up slightly and prints the next layer and moves up and prints the next layer. So this is how many millimeters, I believe, is in between each one. So 0.2 millimeters in between each layer is not going to be as detailed as 0.12, but it is going to be a lot faster because it's having to do less layers. So we can slice it to kind of see how long this is going to take. So this right here with a 0.2 is going to take 5 hours and 16 minutes. If I change that to 0.12, it's going to take even longer. It's going to take 8 hours. So almost twice, not quite, 2/3 as long, an additional 2/3. So 8 hours versus 5 hours. Everything we print, most things we print is 0.2 unless it needs something super detailed on it. That's pretty good for most things. The second thing we can adjust here is the infill percentage. So that was 100%. That means it's 100% solid. So let me show you this right here. The infill percentages is how much plastic is inside the part. So that was set to 100%. That means it's going to be 100% solid inside that snowman. It's going to be a strong part. The more solid it is, the stronger it is. But it's going to take a long time to 3D print that. It was going to take 5 hours. Okay. So if we reduced it to 70%, the inside would look more like this. 40%, you can see that 40% of the inside of this is open arrow. Or 60% is open arrow, 40% is plastic inside. You can kind of see as it goes down how that changes. And there's different patterns. This is a hexagon pattern. You can set the 3D printers to do different patterns inside. They have advantages and disadvantages. A lot of times, like the hexagon's a little bit stronger. You can also just have straight lines, like that make little squares inside. That goes faster, isn't quite as strong, but it's pretty close. But the hexagon is a little bit stronger. So let's see what happens if we reduce this. Like, we don't want our snowman completely hollow. That would not work. Like, if you barely squeezed it, it would crack and fall apart. So, but let's just see how fast that takes. If we made it completely hollow, it's taking longer than usual. Oh, that's something else we need to talk about too, I guess. The other thing to think about is with these snowball slicing, which is taking forever. Let's try that again. There we go. So if we print this right here completely hollow, it would take 1 hour and 17 minutes, which isn't too bad for something that size. If we made it 20%, which is probably what I'll actually end up doing, that'll give it a little bit of strength, and that didn't add that much time to it. So an hour 40 minutes versus an hour 17, so an additional 20 something minutes, and that's going to make the part a whole lot stronger. So with that, the inside's going to look kind of like this. That's pretty good. For something like this that doesn't need a lot of strength, it's just kind of for decoration. It's not like you can kind of squeeze on it a little bit and it's not going to break. If you like step on it or like stomp on it, it'll still break. But you're probably not going to be doing that, hopefully. So the way you guys made your snowman, and we're going to have to fix that also, is it's a ball on bottom. That is not, if we just printed this just like this, that's probably not going to 3D print very well. It might start, it'll probably get up to about right here, and then the printer's going to just barely touch it, and it's going to roll over, right? Because it's just barely sticking like right here on the bottom. So there's a few things we could do. We could add support, and what that does is going to add some time here. Added about an hour. What that does is it makes little lines on any of these parts that are red. And there's probably more here than what we need. Like we probably don't really need support right there. We probably don't really need support right there. We probably don't need it on the hat for sure. But it adds any place where it thinks it might have trouble printing. So it's going to add little lines that go from this part right here to the base plate, from this right here to the base plate, just temporary little lines that you'd have to snap off after it gets done printing so that it looks like you wanted it to. We're not going to do that because it adds ton of time, and then if we're all 3D printing our part, it's going to add a ton of time. So what we're going to do is we're going to modify our snowman a little bit. We're going to cut off the bottom to make it flat. So on Tinkercad, you're going to need to do a little box here. And it doesn't have to, just, we're cutting off part of the bottom to make it flat. So something like that. I made this one, like that size doesn't really matter as long as it's past it. The height was 4. I mean, you could do, it's kind of personal preference. I would do at least 4. If you wanted to do 5 or 6 to cut off more of the bottom, you can. Oops. Make sure it's not going through the bottom of this plane. Something like that, 4 or 5 maybe. And once you do it, combine it all together. Processing. And then make sure you move it back down so that's flat with the build plate. It'll say 0 over here. So something like that, that's going to stick a whole lot better. Then we won't need to add the supports. It might actually take off part of the time even. Let's see. All right, so let's stick that in and let's see what that does to our times here. So it should reduce the times a little bit, I believe. And we won't need the supports for sure. So an hour and 35 minutes. So that's a whole lot better than trying to do it with support, which was another hour over that. A few other things you can do in this program. You can make it smaller, which I do sometimes if it ends up being too big for what I was going to do, or if it's going to take too long and I don't need it quite that big. You can shrink it down in here, but it's better to make it the size you want to begin with, because I'm not exactly like, I guess I can go and measure that and see. But this isn't as precise as if you made it that size to begin with, and it's a lot easier to make it the right size to begin with than it is to shrink smaller. For something just kind of decorative like this that isn't going to like be holding something together, it doesn't matter as much. But that's one thing that you can do in this program to, if you see that it's going to take you too much time or whatever and you need it a little bit shorter, you can shrink it down. We could also make it bigger. You can kind of see, like if we made this as big as our printer could possibly print, which is too big. If we made this as big as we could possibly print it, and we made this completely solid, and we made it the best possible quality we could, it would take 9 days, 14 hours to print. And it would take 391 meters of material. That's over one of those big rolls is 1,000 grams. So that's, I would need more. I'd have to replace the roll halfway through printing it. It would use so much plastic. So definitely don't want to do that. So main thing we do in there is we're adjusting the quality. We're setting the plastic, the density of it. 20% is good for just simple things. 100% if it needs to be a really strong part. We can add support if the part needs it, if something's hanging over. We can add adhesion also, which I might actually do. Adhesion doesn't add that much time. Let's see. So we're at 56 minutes right now. If I add adhesion, it would change it to 1 more minute. What that does is it just makes a little layer around the bottom, just a single layer that kind of sticks out a little bit from the snowman. So it'd be a circle kind of around it. And that just helps it kind of stick down a little bit better. That's very useful for some parts. Like if we were going to do the original snowman with the circle on bottom, you definitely want some kind of adhesion. You probably need support also, but if it just has a little bit of space on the bottom that's touching, adhesion helps it not fall over during 3D printing. So that's about it. I would just save it as STL, put it in the printer, and go.